Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start.
Welcome to the Suncoast Business Forum. I'm Jeffrey Simon. If you've been in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, or Puerto Rico for a while, well, chances are you've been in one of the Sembler Company's many developments. They include a number of Eckerd, Walgreen, and CVS drugstores, as well as Clearwater Mall and St. Petersburg's Baywalk. Over the past 40 years, the Sembler Company has developed more than 250 projects. And last year alone, these projects generated income of more than $300 million. Now that's the business side. Then there's Mel Sembler, the ambassador. From 1989 to 1993, he was ambassador to Australia and Nauru. And recently, he just completed a nearly 4-year term as ambassador to Italy. Ambassador Sembler, welcome to the Suncoast Business Forum.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Glad to be with you.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Now, imagine you were a young man, say around college age, and I said to you and your young wife, imagine someday that you'd be running a large business enterprise and someday you'd end up as a U.S. ambassador. How would you have reacted back then?
I'd have said it's impossible, that it would never happen. It never even crossed my mind. But being successful at business did cross my mind, and that was really my goal from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Now, you grew up in St. Joseph, Missouri. You grew up in St. Joe, but you ended up going to school in Chicago, am I right?
Yes, I went through high school in St. Joe, Missouri, and then went to Northwestern University in a suburb of Chicago called Evanston.
Mm-hmm. And you met your wife-to-be, Betty, there, am I right?
I met my beautiful wife, Betty, and we've been married some 52 years now.
Well, tell me about Betty.
Betty is a very special person. Betty is a very intelligent lady with great determination and great direction. And she has been very important in my life and in our family's life and continues to be that.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you do after college?
Well, when I graduated, the Korean War was on. And my wife and I were talking about getting married, but I said, sweetheart, we cannot get married until I've got my term up into the military, or until at least I know that I'm going to be in the United States. So I left the university with my graduate degree and went home and volunteered for the draft. And the reason I did that is because it was a 2-year term. Had I volunteered for the Army, it would have been a 3-year term. Mm-hmm. So I volunteered for the draft, and they immediately put me into the Army. And I went to Fort Smith, Arkansas. I learned to be an artilleryman. I learned how to fire 105 howitzers. And after I got to be expert at that, they moved me into personnel, and I never left my training base and stayed there for 2 years. Does that sound like the Army?
Yeah. Now, did you gain a lot from that experience in the military?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I saw that I was going to be stationed permanently, my wife and I got married, and we spent almost 2 years, wonderful years in Fort Smith, Arkansas, during the Korean War. While we were there, the war ended, and it was an amazing experience. You learn discipline. You learn how to deal with people. You learn relationship issues. It was very important in our lives, and we left there. And after I left the military, we went out to California, spent about 6 months in California. My wife did not like living in California. So we moved back to Kansas City. And I decided, well, the big decision was there. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I sat down with an uncle of mine, a very successful businessman, and he said, Mel, you've got to learn how to sell. Now, it's not easy, but either go into the insurance business or go into especially advertising business and spend 1 year. And at the end of that year, you'll know how to sell. So I didn't want to sell insurance, so I decided, all right, I'll go into specialty advertising. I spent 1 year 365 days later, I left that job, but I spent 1 year, and you learn how to sell because you get thrown out of a lot of offices. But it was a great experience, and we moved up from that, and of course I went to the advertising agency business. And then my father-in-law said, look, why don't you come down here to Tennessee and let me teach you the retail business? And convinced my father-in-law that perhaps it's time to bring a shopping center to this small community that he was in. And that's where we began. So I really started the retail development business in 1962. We opened our first shopping center in 1965. Our second one, 50 miles away in Jackson, Tennessee, or excuse me, in Union City, Tennessee, in 1966. Our third shopping center in Jackson, Tennessee, in 1967. So it took about 2 years for each one of those projects to be developed. And at that time, it was a very small company, but it was fascinating to watch this new industry, and the shopping centers prospered.
So you went from sales, you went to advertising, you went to retailing, and then to real estate development.
Yes.
Now, real estate development, you had no previous experience. It wasn't part of advertising. It wasn't part of the selling experience or retailing. How did you learn all these things?
Luckily, I found a mentor who was basically a very senior real estate executive in Memphis, Tennessee, who helped educate me, and he was my partner on the first project, and he taught me a great deal. He's now deceased, as are all my original partners, but that's how I learned the industry, and you learn by doing. And but the individual partner was very, very important, and all my partnerships have been very, very instrumental in me learning, because it is a very complicated and difficult field.
Do you feel mentoring is important?
Absolutely.
Obviously, it meant a lot to you. Do you try to mentor others?
Yes, we did. We do. In 1967, on my third shopping center, I partnered with the then president of the International Council of Shopping Centers. The gentleman's name was Aaron Aronoff, and he was from Montgomery, Alabama. And Aaron convinced me that I needed to get active and join the International Council of Shopping Centers. He said the whole organization has a very important thing that they live by. And I said, what is that? He said, if you have a dollar, Mel, and I have a dollar, and we exchange dollars, neither one of us are any better off. We both still have a dollar. But if you have an idea, and you give me your idea, and I have an idea, and I give you my idea, now we both have two ideas. And that's how we share with our colleagues the mistakes we made, the good things that we have. They're your competitors, but they're colleagues, and it basically goes to help the industry. I spent many years, I'm still on the board of directors of the International Council of Shopping Centers, and served as its chairman from 1986 through 1987, which is very prestigious, that 50,000 members would elect me to be head of their organization. When you do that, you leave your business and you spend a year traveling around the world, basically as a spokesperson for the shopping center industry. It was an amazing experience for me to spend all those years, and I was mentored, and I hope that I've been a mentor to others.
Now, over the years, you and your wife and your company have been very, very involved in the community. How did that begin, and how did you find time for all this community involvement that you've done with your very active business schedule?
Well, we have always been very active. We've been active in the synagogue. We've been active with every civic organization, but we have to be kind of passionate about it. We just can't take on everything, but if we really have a great feeling for it, then we're willing to give of our time. Probably the most difficult thing we've ever done in that area would be the creation of the program STRAIGHT, which is a drug rehabilitation program for young people that we began, my wife and I and a few other citizens from St. Petersburg, began in 1976. And we've graduated now from the time till we closed the program down in 1993, some over 12,000 successful young people who graduated from that program. And we were just pleased that we were able to accomplish that. And really it began because the city of St. Petersburg came to see my wife and I, along with a few of the other citizens, to convince us to help them start this program in the community. So it began at the request of the city of St. Petersburg. And I talk about that a lot because when they presented to me the issue, and the issue was, they said, Mel, that we've got a serious problem with young people and drugs in our community. And the problem is that we're rearresting these same young people. So giving them back to the parents is not the answer because we're rearresting the same kids. Sending them to prison is not the answer. And I said, well, what is the answer? And they said, we need to have a local program like the SEED program that you helped bring to our community, was spent about a year here and was very successful with kids and then left. And we'd been a year without the SEED program here. Could we start a program here for our local community? And I said, I'm sure you can, and here's how you would structure it, and it's a good idea, and I'm happy to give you a check, but I don't have time to get involved with that because I'm busy building shopping centers. To which my wife said, Mel, you can build all the shopping centers you can build and still help this program, and you need to do this. And of course, after all these years, you turn to your wife and you say, yes, dear. And I said, I'll give you 1 year. And 17 years later, I was still chairman of the board of the operation. She was absolutely right. And I guess if you want something done, you see a busy person, but you have to have this burning inside to, you think you can really accomplish something and do something that's important. And if you have this burning desire, then I think you can spend the time and the effort to help a lot of people, and I'm convinced that Straight did that.
Well, speaking of burning desire and ambition, you've also, over the years, been very, very active in politics.
Yes.
How did your political activism get started, and how has it grown over the years?
Interestingly enough, the anti-drug war kind of brought us into that because we used to be members of the opposite party. We used to be Democrats. And there's something that happened during the Jimmy Carter administration when his drug czar told America that cocaine was non-addictive and marijuana was an innocuous drug. And here we are treating thousands of children for exactly what the White House was saying was non-addictive and innocuous. And it led us in a position to, wait a minute, this party is on the wrong side of this issue. Couple that with a gentleman who came to see me by the name of Ambassador George Herbert Walker Bush. And he came in 1979, but it was in November, and he wanted to be president of the United States. And he convinced me that he would be an outstanding president, and I was convinced, and my family was convinced. So we did, I guess, his first fundraiser in Florida at our home here in St. Petersburg. Actually, it was in Treasure Island, where we've been living in the same house for 36 years. And that began our association with the Bush family. And we looked awfully good in 1980, the following year in Iowa, but by the time New Hampshire came around, we didn't look so good, and Ronald Reagan won that nomination for the Republican, out of the Republican primary. But Reagan picked Bush to be his vice president, and the vice president and I remained very, very good friends, and we got to be friends with the Reagans as well, and frankly got Mrs. Reagan involved in the drug war. Brought her to St. Petersburg, showed her what we were doing with the young people, and during that visit she committed to take on this issue. So